Chapter 4. It had been arranged that Mrs. Arbuthnot and Mrs. Wilkins, traveling together, should arrive at San Salvatore on the evening of March 31st. The owner, who told them how to get there, appreciated their disinclination to begin their time on it on April 1st. And Lady Caroline and Mrs. Fisher, as yet unacquainted and therefore under no obligations to bore each other on the journey, for only towards the end would they find out by a process of sifting who they were to arrive on the morning of April 2nd. Oh, I see. They're avoiding April Fool's Day. That's silly. In this way, everything would be got nicely ready for the two who seemed, in spite of the equality of the sharing, yet to have something about them of guests. There were disagreeable incidents towards the end of March, when Mrs. Wilkins, her heart in her mouth and her face a mixture of guilt, terror, and determination, told her husband that she had been invited to Italy, and he declined to believe it. Of course he declined to believe it. Nobody had ever invited his wife to Italy before. There was no precedent. He required proofs. The only proof was Mrs. Arbuthnot, and Mrs. Wilkins had produced her. But after what entreaties, what passionate persuading! Mrs. Arbuthnot had not imagined that she would have to face Mr. Wilkins and say things to him that were short of the truth, and it brought home to her what she had suspected for some time, that she was slipping more and more away from God. Indeed, the whole of March was filled with unpleasant, anxious moments. It was an uneasy month. Mrs. Arbuthnot's conscience, made supersensitive by years of pampering, could not reconcile what she was doing with its own high standard of what was right. It gave her little peace. It nudged her at her prayers. It punctuated her entreaties for divine guidance with disconcerting questions such as, "Are you not a hypocrite? Do you really mean that? Would you not, frankly, be disappointed if that prayer were granted?" The prolonged wet, raw weather was on the side, too, of her conscience, producing far more sickness than usual among the poor. They had bronchitis. They had fevers. And there was no end to the distress. And here she was, going off, spending precious money on going off simply and solely to be happy. One woman being happy, and these piteous multitudes? She was unable to look the vicar in the face. He did not know, nobody knew, what she was going to do, and from the very beginning, she was unable to look anybody in the face. She excused herself from making speeches appealing for money. How could she stand up and ask people for money when she herself were spending so much on her own selfish pleasure? Nor did it help her or quiet her that, having actually told Frederick, in her desire to make up for what she was squandering, that she would be grateful if he would let her have some money, he instantly gave her a check for £100. He asked no questions. She was scarlet. He looked at her for a moment and then looked away. It was a relief to Frederick that she should take some money. She gave it all immediately to the organization she worked with, and found herself more tangled in doubts than ever. Mrs. Wilkins, on the contrary, had no doubts. She was quite certain that it was a most proper thing to have a holiday, and altogether right and beautiful to spend one's own hard-collected savings on being happy. "Think how much nicer we shall be when we come back," she said to Mrs. Arbuthnot, encouraging that pale lady. No, Mrs. Wilkins had no doubts, but she had fears, and March was for her, too, an anxious month, with the unconscious Mr. Wilkins coming back daily to his dinner and eating his fish in the silence of imagined security. Also, things happen so awkwardly. It really is astonishing how awkwardly things can happen. Mrs. Wilkins, who was very careful all this month to give Mellersh only the food he liked, buying it and hovering over its cooking with a zeal more than common, succeeded so well that Mellersh was pleased. Oh, definitely pleased. So much pleased that he began to think that he might, after all, have married the right wife instead of, as he had frequently suspected, the wrong one. The result was that, on the third Sunday in the month, Mrs. Wilkins had made up her trembling mind that on the fourth Sunday, there being 5 in that March, and it being on the 5th of them that she and Mrs. Arbuthnot were to start, she would tell Mellersh of her invitation. On that third Sunday, then, after a very well-cooked lunch in which the Yorkshire pudding had melted in his mouth and the apricot tart had been so perfect that he ate it all, Mellersh, smoking his cigar by the brightly burning fire, the while hail... That seems a typo. By the brightly burning fire, while hail gusts banged on the window, said, "I'm thinking of taking you to Italy for Easter." And paused for her astounded and grateful ecstasy. None came. The silence in the room, except for the hail hitting the windows and the gay roar of the fire, was complete. Mrs. Wilkins could not speak. She was dumbfounded. The next Sunday was the day she had meant to break her news to him, and she had not even prepared the form of words in which she could break it. Mr. Wilkins, who had not been abroad since before the war, and was noticing with increasing disgust, as week followed week of wind and rain, the peculiar persistent vileness of the weather, had slowly conceived a desire to get away from England for Easter. He was doing very well in his business. He could afford a trip. Switzerland was useless in April. There was a familiar sound about Easter in Italy. To Italy he would go, and as it would cause comment if he did not take his wife, take her he must. Besides, she would be useful. A second person was always useful in a country whose language one did not speak, for holding things, for waiting with the luggage. He had expected an explosion of gratitude and excitement. The absence of it was incredible. She could not, he concluded, have heard. Perhaps she was absorbed in some foolish daydream. It was regrettable how childish she remained. He turned his head, for their chairs were in front of the fire, and looked at her. She was staring into the fire, and it was no doubt the fire that made her face so red. "I am thinking," he repeated, raising his clear, cultivated voice and speaking with acerbity, for inattention at such a moment was deplorable, "of taking you to Italy for Easter. Did you not hear me?" Yes, she had heard him, and she had been wondering at the extraordinary coincidence, really extraordinary. She was just going to tell him how she had been invited. A friend had invited her. Easter, too. Easter was in April, wasn't it? Her friend had a house there. In fact, Mrs. Wilkins, driven by terror, guilt, and surprise, had been more incoherent, if possible, than usual. It was a dreadful afternoon. Mellersh, profoundly indignant, besides having had his intended treat coming back on him like a blessing to roost, cross-examined her with the utmost severity. He demanded that she refuse the invitation. He demanded that since she had so outrageously accepted it without consulting him, she should write and cancel her acceptance. Finding himself up against an unexpected, shocking rock of obstinacy in her, he then declined to believe at all that she had been invited to Italy. He declined to believe in this Mrs. Arbuthnot, of whom till that moment he had never heard, and it was only when the gentle creature was brought round, with such difficulty, with such a desire on her part to throw the whole thing up, rather than tell Mr. Wilkins less than the truth, and herself endorsed his wife's statements, that he was able to give them credence. He could not but believe Mrs. Arbuthnot. She produced the precise effect on him that she did on tube officials. She hardly needed to say anything, but that made no difference to her conscience, which knew and would not let her forget that she had given him an incomplete impression. "Did you," asked her conscience, "see any real difference between an incomplete impression and a completely stated lie? God sees none." The remainder of March was a confused, bad dream. Both Mrs. Arbuthnot and Mrs. Wilkins were shattered. Try as they would not to, both felt extraordinarily guilty. And when on the morning of the 30th they did finally get off, there was no exhilaration about the departure, no holiday feeling at all. We've been too good, much too good, Mrs. Wilkins kept on murmuring as they walked up and down the platform at Victoria, having arrived there an hour before they need have. And that's why we feel as though we're doing wrong. We're browbeaten. We're not any longer real human beings. Real human beings are never as good as we've been. Oh, she clenched her thin hands. To think that we ought to be so happy now, here on the very station, actually starting, and we're not, and it's being spoilt for us just simply because we've spoilt them. What have we done? What have we done? I should like to know, she inquired of Mrs. Arbuthnot indignantly, except for once want to go away by ourselves and have a little rest from them. Mrs. Arbuthnot, patiently pacing, did not ask who she meant by them, because she knew. Mrs. Wilkins meant their husbands, persisting in her assumption that Frederick was as indignant as Mellersh over the departure of his wife, whereas Frederick did not even know his wife had gone. Mrs. Arbuthnot, always silent about him, had said nothing of this to Mrs. Wilkins. Frederick went too deep into her heart for her to talk about him. He was having an extra bout of work, finishing another of those dreadful books, and had been away practically continually the last few weeks, and was away when she left. Why should she tell him beforehand? Sure as she so miserably was that he had no objection to anything she did, she merely wrote him a note and put it on the hall table ready for him, if and when he should come home. She said she was going for a month's holiday as she needed a rest, and she had not had one for so long, and that Gladys, the efficient parlor maid, had orders to see to his comforts. She did not say where she was going. There was no reason why she should. He would not be interested. He would not care. The day was wretched, blustering, and wet. The crossing was atrocious, and they were very sick. But after having been very sick, just to arrive at Calais and not be sick was happiness. And it was there that the real splendor of what they were doing first began to warm their benumbed spirits. It got hold of Mrs. Wilkins first, and spread from her like a rose-colored flame over her pale companion. Mellersh at Calais, where they restored themselves with souls because of Mrs. Wilkins' desire to eat a soul Mellersh wasn't having. Mellersh at Calais had already begun to dwindle and seem less important. None of the French porters knew him. Not a single official at Calais cared a fig for Mellersh. In Paris, there was no time to think of him because their train was late and they only just caught the Turin train at the Gare de Lyons. I know I said that wrong, but I don't care. And by the afternoon of the next day, when they got into Italy, England, Frederick, Mellersh, the vicar, the poor, Hampstead, the club, and Shoolbred, everybody and everything, the whole inflamed, sore dreariness had faded to the dimness of a dream. And that's the end of chapter 4. Well, that didn't even take me an hour today. And I was suffering greatly from ADHD. Oh, big stretch. Okay, I've got to look up more about the San Salvatore Castle. It has its own website, Castello San Salvatore. Is this all in Italian? Will I be able to read it? But no. See, I love that juxtaposition between a husband who couldn't care less and a husband who cares maybe too much to the point of overjudgment, where his wife can never feel perfectly happy because she never feels as if she's doing well enough for him. Oh, it is all in Italian. It has an English option. Let's go. I do have to accetta tutti before I can see the website, though. Oh, you can do corporate events at this castle? What? Oh, that estate is massive. It's got its own winery? No. Do I have to buy this wine? I think I have to buy this wine. If I could read the website. How much is it? Interestingly enough, this is an aside I did not expect today, but we're gonna do it. Italian websites are requiring me to confirm I'm 18 to go to a liquor-based website, which is very funny to me. Oh, they have Sapreco, Vinny Bianchi. I have no idea. Oh, there's a rosé. I think I know how to say rosé. And other spirits. A dry gin, a calatro. Weird. Okay, so this castle has been fictionalized to be smaller for this book, but does exist, which is fantastic. It also does not appear to be near the ocean at all. It is a vineyard castle. But still, that's fantastic. We could actually go there someday. It says it hosts weddings there. I don't know what wedding it would be, but we could do a wedding there. That's a silly idea, but it's a silly idea I like. I do like it quite a lot. Now, up to this point in the book, I should probably talk about the book. We just read the book. Up to this point in the book, the last two chapters, specifically, the last two chapters have really just been introducing two new characters. We've not learned anything about Lady Carolyn, which makes me think we will learn much about her in short order. And we learned much about Mrs. Fisher. She got about the same introduction as Mrs. Wilkins and Mrs. Arbuthnot, to make me think that we will actually not see that much of Mrs. Fisher going forward. She's going to be like a lightning rod for the troubles that will appear in Italy. She'll give advice and such in Italy. Meanwhile, it almost seems like we've set up a romantic interest for Mrs. Arbuthnot. I'm not sure. At the beginning of this book, what I told you guys was that I believed this to be a romance in the way that the Victorian period idolized life itself, that romantic sense of life, not in the sense that this would have relational romances. And indeed, it would be quite uncommon for a book like this to turn around and have a married woman start an affair, even if she was married to a smut author who frequently simply ignored her. And it's implied so that the reader can get it, but you couldn't get it from the text, most likely is having multiple affairs, right? It's hard to write smut if you're not having sex, as I understand. And it seems clear that they are not having any. Even with those terrible situations implied and explicitly outlined in the book, I have a hard time believing that an author from the turn of the century would write an affair romance, especially after demeaning the smut at the beginning of the book. It doesn't make sense to me. I feel like that was more of an aside with the renter. Actually, I can think of one way this turns out. This will be my call for this book, okay? Okay, here's my call for this book. I made a call with the Blue Castle that turned out to be correct. She was laying it on a little thicker there, but I missed the really big twist, so I have a feeling this is going to be that again. I'm going to catch the obvious one really early on, and I'm going to miss the big twist. Maybe Mrs. Arbuthnot comes home to find out her husband is divorcing her, and thus she is able to have a romance with that renter artist. Because it's clear Mrs. Arbuthnot loves artists, right? She married an author and a librarian, a quiet one to be sure, but still an artist. And I don't think she has any real objection to artistry, especially when done correctly. I can see a situation here where by the end of the book, she is divorced and able to begin a courtship with that artist. That's my call. I don't think we'll get to see any of that happen till the actual end of the book. it's going to be one of those cases where probably the arc is that while they're in the castle in Italy, Mrs. Arbuthnot becomes more and more okay, and maybe she even gets to the point where she decides to try and divorce her husband, difficult as it is in this time period. Maybe she even decides to try to, only to come home and find out that he has given her what she already wanted, and thus she is able to do something else. That may be the arc for Mrs. Arbuthnot. Right? I'm trying to guess ahead, really, and figure out what the satisfying arc would be for each character. I don't feel like Mrs. Fisher has much of an arc. Feels like she's being portrayed as a bit too old towards the end of her own story to have an arc, right? Lady Carolyn, being single and hating everything about her life, has a pretty obvious one to me. She's going to meet some peasant boy and fall madly in love. Fantastic. I love it. Now, if only I was that peasant boy. But Mrs. Wilkins and Mrs. Arbuthnot are the most difficult to me, being the two titular main characters. Not titular. Why did I say titular? No, but they are the two main characters. Mrs. Arbuthnot's, I believe, is coming to the decision that she needs to divorce her husband for a myriad of factors. Or rather, she needs to loosen up, one of those two. But I doubt that the moral of this story is become okay with your husband writing smut. I doubt that very much. Mrs. Wilkins' arc, I don't know. I don't know what her arc would be at all. Mrs. Wilkins has, by any of the ladies so far, we have seen the most of her home life, and we understand, I think, the most about her as a person. That being said, I have no idea what her growth arc is supposed to be here. I can't see it yet.